Thank you very much to our
Okay, thank you, Mia, and a warm word of welcome to Bruce, our special guest, and Andrew Lamprecht, who kindly agreed to join us as well. Andrew, I want to start with you, and I want you to tell us about this famous bar, the night spot, the Joburg bar in Cape Town. Tell us what it is all about, and what is the allure of that place.
Well, Joburg was really, I think, in some ways, almost the center of the Cape Town art world during the early 2000s, which was a really important time in South African art. It was a time of massive transition. I mean, in some ways, the art world we have today starts in the early 2000s. I mean, I was thinking about it, that you had Bell Roberts Gallery just around the corner from Joburg Bar. You had Michaelis School of Fine Art just up the road. You had the AVA within walking distance, the National Gallery within walking distance, and João Ferreira within walking distance. And it was absolutely the tradition that after an opening at any of those places, people would congregate at Joburg Bar. Students obviously also used to come there after school. Many artists used to come to Joburg Bar. Many celebrities came to Joburg Bar. It was one of the top 20 bars in the world, according to Harper's and Queen at around about this time. Film stars who were making films, you know, etc. You could spot Madonna there, you know, very, very famous people. And it was really seen as the kind of, amongst other things, it was the artist's bar. And what was important, I think, about that period is you saw those galleries I mentioned were essentially all the galleries that were in Cape Town. You know, and what would happen, you know, during the period of those early 2000s, you could see Stevenson opening, Goodman opening, then hundreds, well, dozens of other galleries would start opening up. Initially in the city centre, you know, they've moved a little bit now into other areas like Woodstock and so on. But it was incredibly thriving period, and I think everyone was very excited about art. They knew that something was changing in the air. And Bruce Gordon, hi Bruce, was like the kind of mind here, you know, the host with the most, so to speak, who was invariably present, or often present, certainly after the art events, a very central figure in the art world at the time. It's really, you know, on any given night, you'd be likely to spot any of the artists that you mentioned that are in this exhibition. I mean, in this session, and many other artists who were visiting Cape Town or based in Cape Town.
And the artworks that are on this online auction, were they actually in the bar, or were they in a private collection? Or
no, most of them were in the bar. I think Bruce kept one or two in his office upstairs, like the poster that we see on the screen at the moment. But the vast majority of them were in the bar, yes, at one time or
okay,
another.
Because what I want to do is to go through, and we have a good 30 lots, and to go through and try and go through most, if not all of them, and then I'm going to invite you and Bruce, if he wants to say something about the artwork. But let's start with lot 92, the Brett Murray, with quite a quirky title. Respect your tribal elders. What is this all about?
This is a photograph, obviously, by Brett Murray. It's a work by Brett Murray, in fact, and it's showing, you know, this is the very first MCQP, the Mother City Queer Project, and what happened there were, which originally was absolutely an artist event. It was an event for artists. It's become, of course, a very important landmark on the LGBTQI kind of terrain, but it was very much an artist event organized by Andrew Fister and Andrew Putter, who again were frequently seen, you know, in Joburg Bar. And what happened was, this was a locker room project based on sports. Each part has a theme, and this one was the first one, as I say, of the MCQPs. And here we see Barend de Wet on the right, Bruce in the center, and Brett. And they're dressed up as sumo wrestlers, both Bruce is a more, but and I think a very ironic title, Respect Your Tribal Elders. You know, I think they might be a little bit worse for wear from drink at this point, and basically it's Yeah, dressed up
Yeah,
as sumo
and
wrestlers.
I think, you know, the tribal elder, this idea, it was also, you mentioned this time of transition in South African history. I know at that point in the 90s and even up to today, the authority of the tribal elder is still discussed up to today in South African politics.
Yes,
you know, what is their role in a democracy? So I find that quite interesting. But it's interesting that you mention, you know, that they were dressed up as sumo or wrestlers, because Brett Murray is no stranger to different persona, and he really takes on quite a vast number of these. Now, what you see here is on the left, the cover of the monograph on him, and there he is dressed up as Louis XVI, you know, the sun god, with a black face. And it all started, I think, at the back cover of that very thick monograph. Has the image on the right, the Dark Prince of South African pop art. He's dead center. And that, of course, refers to one of a photograph where he dressed up as, I think, a little Zulu boy to join a party of some sort. And on the left, you have the Sun King, but here operating as a gardener. So it's quite interesting that the manner in which he takes on different personas and takes the Mickey out of these things. So also this I find interesting. He is dressed up as a baby, and typical. You know, I'm old and grey, and I still remember the photographers going around schools and taking class photographs and individual ones of the pupils. And you would have that little blackboard with the letters that can be changed. And so I think that the idea here is that you can change your identity, you know, from the president to the legend. And there's a whole series of these photos. Okay, now the next lot is an Andrew Putter. You already mentioned his name, large blue glitter painting. Your thoughts about this work?
Well, this is, I mean, for me, this is an absolutely exquisite work. It's got a real material presence. When in its presence, it literally glistens and glitters. Again, I think a reference to kind of camp aesthetics, queer aesthetics, the idea of glitter and glamour and bling and so on. A fairly large scale work. The dimensions aren't here, but I would say about a meter and a half or so diagonally. And what Bruce did was to actually install this on the dance floor. It's protected under glass and so on, but you know, it's installed on the dance floor. And then Bruce, you know, I think he consulted with Andrew. Perhaps Bruce can let us know. But he spoke to the artist, and in fact, the entire dance floor then became glittered. I mean, of course, the dance floor is installed in the bar, but this wonderful work was
great, absolutely fantastic. And then the Barend de Wet, there are a couple of them. It's this particular work and this one. And what can you tell us about Barend his work?
Well, Barend, of course, passed away a few years ago, very tragically, incredibly tragically. A great friend of Bruce's, a neighbor at one time of Bruce's. And Barend, one of his last bodies of work was these knitted works. In fact, he really showcased them on the first Cape Town Art Fair. I actually curated that installation, and basically, I think he was looking at, you know, the barriers between craft and art. These are paintings, and I think what's interesting is, you know, if one thinks of an artist like Van Gogh or somebody like that, you know, who uses these thick lines of paint, and in fact, if you go to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, you'll see these little skeins of wool that he used in order to kind of test out different color combinations and things like that. So I think it's a work that really has a strong link to the history of art in general, and which Barend was definitely aware of in terms of that. And you know, this idea of knitting Barend was very interested in lots of weird and wonderful things. Beekeeper, yo-yo player, knitter. I remember very well this amazing sermon he did as a Echtje Kerk Dominee at Smack, where it was like, he was going like, brei, brei, you know, brei being, of course, knitting and also, you know, the particular accent, and Stellenbosch, whatever, he was doing this in Stellenbosch. So I think it was, you know, he was really looking at that. And again, Barend was somebody who took on different personas. So yeah. I remember at one of the very early Joburg art fairs, he actually had himself in a knitted outfit, which he then proceeded to unravel in public. And I mean, the organizers rushed there because it was directly opposite the kids' painting area. And, you know, Barend was well known for taking his clothes off in various contexts. And, you know, they're not... Barend was very much a performative artist in many ways. Oh, there we see this picture.
There you have it today. And from Nine Machine on the left to knitting on the right. Right.
Yeah, so he was a performer, and I mean, it's not often possible to get physical objects that manifest those performances. So that's, you know, it's a unique opportunity to get a physical object that manifests a performance.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. I think here you can see these are posters from Smack Gallery. I had a close relationship with Smack Gallery, and these are the 4 exhibitions he mounted there. And you can almost see his development as an artist through these posters. You mentioned the different personas. So here you have a couple more, you know, dressing up sort of various personas, and then taking this idea, you mentioned the idea of craft, and taking it further. Here it is needlework or embroidery on the left, as you can see there, and then the knitting, the knitted work on the right, and many of those performances that you mentioned earlier on. He's also, just like Brett Murray, also no strangers to taking on different identities. Here, I think he and Christian Nerf swapped identities, and which is quite nice. Okay, we're getting to the next lot 96, the Conrad Botes, Siembamba, Bitterkomix 4. What can you tell us about this work?
I don't think Bitterkomix needs terribly much introduction to most people. I think everyone knows it's an extremely important publication in the history of comic books and visual art in South Africa. You know, this is an art. There we go. I mean, been going for many years, very controversially in some cases, in terms of its representation of graphic sex, and also in terms of race politics. There's been a lot of controversy around that, and how Black people have been represented in those works. Nevertheless, people are very consider it a very important moment in art. You can see their baby's neck being cracked, etc., and then the old South African flag. Notice aimed at the bottom end, which is quite interesting. Siembamba, of course, being a famous
nursery rhyme, yeah,
rather violent and terribly violent lullaby, actually. Which, if you you know, it sounds very nice if you listen to it, but if you think of the words, they're terrible, and yeah, you know, something which this very violent song, which is a famous Afrikaans lullaby.
Yeah, so
this is a limited edition.
What you see in the middle row is sort of draai sy nek om, gooi hom in die sloot, and then trap op sy kop, and dan is hy dood. Yeah. So quite violent, yes.
Indeed. And this is a limited edition print, of course, not from a comic. Yeah.
Yeah, so great. So sometimes we do offer a whole complete set of the Bitterkomix on our auctions, as you can see from this image. Okay, Sue Williamson. You know, I know her a very different part of her work, not this particular work. What can you tell us about this one?
Sue, of course, was Bruce's partner at this time. A very well-known South African artist and art writer, founded Art Throb, which was really the only place you could find information on South African art until Art Africa magazine came along. And then, of course, which was published, as I say, around the corner. Sue Williamson Sue Williamson does work in many media. I mean, she works in numerous media. This is a sculptural installation. And what she's done is she's taken the forms, Formes, with an E at the end, of that are used in mass production of machinery. And so what would happen is these would be lovingly crafted in wood and then cast in a metal or plastic or whatever they were to form machinery. So these are the originals of those. They found objects, she's acquired them, and then she's installed it into this abstract installation, which graced the walls of Joburg Bar. It was installed onto the walls. It's a very large scale piece. It's not very large scale. It's a couple of meters wide, with real materiality and they were installed quite high up because I think people wanted to touch them all the time. They've got a lovely material presence as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because if you do want to know more about her, this is the cover of that very thick monograph of hers, covering I think basically her whole oeuvre. And then very different work of hers. I think the one on the left is in the Gauteng legislature at the moment, and it is sort of I think 47 years close to my heart. The identity documents, the Yompas that she used for that work, and the work on the right, if I'm not mistaken, deals with the Truth and Reconciliation Committee.
Truth games,
and
which
these
move
panels.
along. Yeah.
Yeah, they move along, and you can change that work. It's an interactive work. You can change it, and the black and the white faces can merge, if you like, and so on. Very fascinating work. This is also quite a famous work, the very first Johannesburg Biennale in 1995, Letters from the Moat. It is called, and you can see on the sides installation photographs from an angle and dead ahead. And then each of the bottles, it's almost like catching fish, if you like, and pulling it up. I think there was also water dripping out, so to give you the idea that it is fish just being caught in a net. But I think that each bottle, yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, and again, the use of found objects, similar to the one that's on auction now. Yeah, sorry,
yeah.
Wilhelm.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, that whole idea. Okay, delightful work, Sanell Aggenbach. It's called Bleak.
Yeah, these are absolutely amazing. This is a sheep, which is made, obviously, black sheep, which has been made from polyester and covered in velour or velvet of some sort. Originally installed in the AVA, I remember that exhibition. It was really Sanell's breakthrough exhibition in many ways. You know, Bruce was just before, Bruce was an incredible patron of the arts, and he has an incredible eye for seeing talent as it emerges. And I actually remember this night. Bruce was absolutely adamant about purchasing this, and people didn't even know if they were available. This was an installation. All these black sheep are staring down at a little dot in the middle of the gallery, and somehow he managed to buy one. I don't know how he knew the artist. Was actually, as I say, part of more an installation. But then wonderful sculptural objects. I think this is the survivor of three. There were three in the bar, and they were, because they were light and so on, people used to like grab them and throw them around with abandon on the dance floor. But this one, I think, was probably kept upstairs and is in pristine condition. But I think the other two suffered the slings and arrows of 20 years of bar life.
Wonderful, wonderful. And if I'm not mistaken, she then also entered those three for the ABSAT year, which she won that particular year, 2003. And the interesting thing, this is what the whole work looked like. These three little creatures stared at a tapestry based on a Pirnieff painting. Yeah, so there you are. So that gives this work quite added significance, if you like. But this is how it was reproduced in the catalogue of 2003. Ed Young.
excuse me, Ed Younge was, of course, a student at Michaelis, and he was also really a very regular attendee at almost a fixture, one could say, at Joburg Bar during that time. Very great friends with, well, Bruce was is very good friends with him. There's an interesting story about this, but before I get to that, I just want to say what it's wood and bronze. Very rare example of Ed Younge's own handwork, so to speak. Ed, of course, is very famous for his sculptures of Superman and Archbishop Tutu and so on, and very famous for his sort of nomination work, his very ephemeral written works and things like that. But this is actually something made by his own hands. He, cast in bronze, a unique bronze casting. It wasn't done in addition, as far as I know. And maybe Bruce can tell us, but I seem to recall that this was in exchange for a bar tab, if I'm not mistaken. I think it had racked up quite a large bar tab, and Bruce very generously made the swap. I don't know if Bruce wants to say anything about that.
Bruce? Is that the truth? Let's start there.
I think Bruce is on mute. Anyway, I'm pretty. While Bruce is getting unmuted, there he goes.
Okay. Yeah, quite a few of my acquisitions was through people stalling on their bar tabs, and I was very pleased to receive this work from Ed.
Yeah.
Because this work puzzled me really. So I thought Christmas Bunny, there's an anachronism there, but then I thought maybe it might be in lieu of a stuffed turkey served during Christmas and what have you. And then it reminded me of this Anton Kannemeyer, where there's also something else offered on the plate here. Instead of the head of the pig, but you have another type of head. Okay, Dale Yudelman.
Well, this is these works are kind of captured moments. Dale Yudelman would take his camera takes his camera onto the street, and these are these little moments, these reality bites. Again, a reference to computers, bites, but little snippets of reality. So using the artist's eye to find a little moments. These are all things that he saw on the side of the road or on the beach or wherever it was in New York City, and he would just find these little fascinating glimmers. And Dale, to this day, you'll see him around Cape Town with his camera taking photographs, capturing these unique moments.
I like this particular work, bottom left here, because that face reminds me of the work of John Balasari, who often would take photographs and then block out the faces with a pink or a red or a yellow dot of some sort. So I quite like this particular photograph. Okay, moving on to this cartoon.
Well, this is a really a wonderful, and in some ways it's a fabulous piece. It's a cartoon by the late Derek Bauer, a great friend of Bruce's. I think Bruce's closest friend at the time, who passed away quite soon after this. I mean, Derek is now recognized as an absolutely foundational cartoonist in the history of South Africa. Strongly anti-apartheid in his work, but also making a progenitor or precursor to a lot of the more humorous artists like Brett Murray, who used humor and so on. And what this shows is Bruce, who was at that stage, he hadn't owned a bar, he hadn't yet founded the bar, but he was, he sold T-shirts and produced T-shirts and a lot of other printed goods. And I believe this was done at the Grahamstown Festival, and it's the first. It represents the first meeting of Marilyn, Martin, and Bruce Gordon. Derek, as his good friend, is pointing out that he spent a day in the sun selling T-shirts. He may have had a drink or two by this stage, and Marilyn's like looking rather shocked and almost like moving backwards from Bruce. Of course, they would have a very important. There'll be an important sequel to this meeting later on, which we'll get to, no doubt. In the the artwork Bruce Gordon acquired by the National Gallery. We'll talk about that later. But you know, absolutely evocative, a wonderful, wonderfully characteristic pencil drawing cartoon.
Yeah. And Bruce, if I may ask you, what do you think of this one? You know, every time a portrait is done, you know, the first question is it a good likeness?
I'm quite horrified by the way that my best friend saw me. But it was definitely after a long party session.
That's good. That's good. And what I also thought about, you know, the power of cartoons, and especially political cartoons, because it reminded me of this exhibition. I also it started in Johannesburg at the gallery here, but I think it also went to Iziko. It was an exhibition of 3 decades of political graphics from the United Kingdom and South Africa, and Derek was also on this particular exhibition, you know. So, and if one thinks of what happened recently with Charlie Hebdo in Paris, you know, because of a political cartoon, work such as this is absolutely very powerful.
And not many of Derek's works available on the market yet.
Yeah, no. Exactly. They are as rare as hen's teeth. You don't get them. Yeah. I think this is the very first one that Strauss and Company is offering. Okay, we're moving on to this work. What on earth is going on here?
Well, Gallery Puttar was this, again, I must be careful because I was involved in it. That's me on the left, speak about horrible representation. So a gallery, this is Cameron Platter had produced this poster. Gallery Puttar was a sort of loose informal group that included, as you're going along there, myself, Ed Younge, Cameron Platter, Dan Halter, Christian Nerf was involved as well for this final event. Visa Niamende was involved at various parts. I can't remember now. Lots and lots of artists sort of joined and came. And it was actually founded in Joburg Bar. What had happened was the artists mentioned, I think it all, most of them anyway, had entered the Upsa Atelier that year, mostly with this conceptual art, interesting, you know, art today that we don't blink at twice. But you know, I think the judges at the Upsa Atelier were horrified that year, and all of these works were rejected for the shortlist. You know, which wasn't really hard to get onto. I mean, you know, there are 100 artists chosen, and there weren't that many artists participating. But I think they were trying to make the local pre-judges were trying to make a bit of a statement. So all the slightly wounded individuals, once they got the news, congregated in Joburg Bar, and I believe it was Cameron who said, you know, well, what one has to do is really sell your body to you know, sell, what we're going to do, are we going to sell our bodies now rather than make art, because clearly nobody wants us. So Puttar is, of course, like Puttanesca source, the, you know, the sex worker, a particularly like visceral word for sex worker. And it's basically saying artists, you know, having to prostitute their work in order to do something. And the very first part, how these were manifest were generally in parties of some sort. But Puttar produced very little work. Of course, they would have an influence on things like avant-garde, other art movements of these collectives. You know, the idea of a collective, group of artists coming together to produce work together. There were a few physical works produced. I remember an inflatable woman with signed by fake Vladimir Trechikov, referring to, you know, the fakeness of something, and which of course got destroyed in the process of the party, no doubt. So it's a very, very rare physical. I stand to correction. I think almost unique physical manifestation of that period. Bruce obviously kept the poster after the event. You know, I actually looked amongst my stuff to see if I had any Gallery Puttar ephemera. I was involved. I was one of the founders and continued right to the end, as you can see. And I couldn't find anything that I had from that period. You know, it's all these things disappeared into the mists of haze, mists of a haze, and it's wonderful that Bruce preserved. You know, he was who knew it, but he was a bit of an archivist of that period as well. So, you know, a work produced by Cameron for Gallery Puttar as a collective.
And it struck me, you know, while you were explaining this, that in a sense, this is the Mademoiselle d'Avignon of
Yes.
conceptual art, if you like.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course, of course. It's making a reference to Mademoiselle d'Avignon, which famously portrayed sex workers. Yes, exactly.
There you go. Another work by Sue
Very,
Williamson.
very,
Is this a
very,
print?
very early print by Sue. Very beautiful. A literary reference to the grass harp. Yeah, very beautiful, very beautiful. Again, this is at the time that Sue started producing political work. I know there's no political work on the exhibition as well. I mean, she was very involved in standing up against the apartheid regime, but she also made these beautiful, language pieces. And as I say, Bruce's partner at the time, and for many years, and in some ways, I suppose, a gift of love to
lovely, lovely work. Another quirky work by Barend de Wet. And George Hallett, yeah. Sad story, yes.
Well, I think the time we should, just note that for those who don't know, I'm afraid, George has just very, very recently passed. Very, very sad to hear that one of our great photographers, really great photographers. I'm absolutely cut up by the news of George's passing. He also was somebody you often saw at Joburg Bar. And I mean, this photograph is really one of the most important, very important photograph of original photograph of Nelson Mandela in that characteristic pose as president, sort of on the phone, speaking to somebody. Yeah.
And what I like about this work is, he's a very suave person in this work. We know him as the boxer, as the lawyer, but here he's quite elegant and suave, I think.
And now this is him as the president, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. This work, Thomas Mulcahy.
Mulcahy, of course. He's got quite a major international reputation. He's a South African artist who resides in Brazil and occasionally comes to South Africa. Better known on the international scene than he is locally, actually, because he's produced a number of exhibitions. He's also well known as a curator. He was involved in the curation of the Sao Paulo Biennale, etc. And I think what's quite interesting here is, again, the use of found objects. A lot of people were wondering, or found images, I should say, sorry. And these are prints of these things, of these original double folds in magazines. And again, Bruce was really a pioneer in collecting this work, which was, a lot of people would say, is this art? I mean, today we don't blink an eye at this kind of stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Dale, you mentioned Dale, and here's another work.
Another work, Contact Sheet. It's not literally a contact sheet. It's an artwork called Contact Sheet, which is of a contact sheet. Dale was also very interested in multiple images and multiplication of images and so on. And this is a way of showing all these things. You can see again, similarly to what we saw before, but yeah, with multiple images, things that he saw on the street.
This is probably my favorite of the whole session, this particular work, Joburg Man.
Well, this is an incredible, almost a monumental work. Some may recall that Zeitz Mocker, before it was Zeitz Mocker, when it was still the silos, there was I forget what the event was, but the entire side of that silo was festooned with this image for an art event. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was projected onto the silo, I should say, for a particular art event, and really an iconic image, very, very skillfully photoshopped or photo montaged, I should say, and with original painting additions by Alim Amala Ravid. You can kind of see that on there. And this was one of the works that stood proud of place in Joburg Bar.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think you see the same sort of walking man, but this time straddling one of the highways, running through Los
Yeah,
Angeles.
just to explain, it's photography and painting together, juxtaposition,
Okay.
the two artists. So.
Yeah, great. I think it is it is quite phenomenal. And then Dan Halter, was he also a regular?
Oh, absolutely. You know, started off as a student at Michaelis, and we'll see one of his student, very important student works coming up. This is, of course, a much later work, Perfection and a number plate, and you'll notice that the letter R is missing. I actually happen to have a tattoo of this on my, a similar tattoo on me, which was complicated, but it was part of an art event, artwork, I should say, with Christian Nerf and Barend de Wet again. And yeah, you know, again, the number plate without the letter R. This is, as I said, yeah, a later work than the student work.
Yeah, no, I think quite delightful. Also by Dan Halter.
But this is a tiny, tiny little yellow Mealie pop, and this is actually a work that had a genesis in Joburg Bar. I mean, some people might know these are. This is a tiny Mealie pip that has been laser cut with this this phrase: "When the belly is full, the brain starts to think." Dan would take these well-known idioms from Zimbabwe. And you know, the idea was also that the incredible struggle that people were having to acquire food in Zimbabwe. So you know, one Mealie pip takes on another significance. And why I say it has its genesis in Joburg Bar, and the body of work, I should say, with Dan Halter does these laser cuts onto Mealie pips, is because Dan was trying to work out the technique of it. And I still remember the conversation. I think what he was going to do, if I'm not mistaken, was actually going to write "When the belly is full, the brain starts to think." Bruce and I were sitting there and, you know, workshopping art. And then Dan, I think Bruce contributed to this, you know, and said, why don't you write it on the Mealie pip itself? And eventually Dan came up with this idea of laser cutting it onto it. And so this, I think this is a proof of it, if I'm not mistaken, was then given to Bruce as a thank you for his involvement in that artwork. Yeah.
Okay, I think quite clever. Another Dan Halter work, really interesting.
This is a really, in my opinion anyway, a really important work in the development of Dan Halter. It might look a little different to what you see today. This is a part of his probably the main work of his final Michaelis show. And as far as I know, to some extent, it shows the beginning of his interest in materiality and materiality. What you're seeing here, it's a little hard to see perhaps on the screen. It's a very large scale. You know, it's many times his face. Is his face been drawn out with rubbish bags, and what's been placed on it and how he's achieved texture and shade is the detritus of a bark. So stumpies, coasters, crushed cigarette packets, things like that. A little bit of ash where you can see sort of his beard line, a really, really fine drawing here. And then in the background, well, expired medical pills, but you know, this idea of pills and excess and so on. And the way it was originally presented, as I recall, was presented flat on the ground with sweets covering it, with a similar portrait. And then the idea of the children's sweets, and then as one becomes adult, you find your sweets in other forms, and then those were supposed to be swept up, revealing this image of Dan Halter as he saw himself at that time. The eyes are made of two shot glasses. The center of the eyes are two shot glasses, which points out. Yeah.
Absolutely delightful. Absolutely delightful. It reminds me very much of the work of Julian Schnabel, but he, of course, used these broken plates. But I think quite a captivating work. Gavin Younge, was he a colleague of yours at Michaelis?
Absolutely, it was a colleague of mine at Michaelis. I wouldn't say a regular at Joburg Bar, but you'd seen them from time to time, perhaps after work and so on. It was also a wonderful place where students and staff would kind of meet together as well. You know, we heard earlier about these early Fridays, but the Pedicurist kit, you know, everyone thinks of these little, I think that the work speaks for itself, yes.
Yeah, no, indeed, very powerful, macabre perhaps, yeah. And this, you need to explain this to me because this is very intriguing.
Well, as I say, Sue Williamson is well known as you know, an artist who really questioned stuff to do with apartheid. And what this was a kind of an event that she hosted as I think it was literally the last days of District 6, just before the bulldozers came in. There was literally a last supper in one of the very, very last, if not the last houses before the bulldozers came in. And members of the family and friends of the people whose homes were encouraged by Sue to write on the walls. And this became an installation later on in Hallett Gallery in Cape Town, gallery that has long passed, 1981. And again, a print of this. This is a print, again, interesting example of something that's ephemeral, and the only remaining trace we have of it things like this print, numbered print that exists in very, very small limitation, as I can see.
Yeah, you mentioned District 6. I also remember an exhibition at Goodman Gallery many years ago where she went back to District 6 and try and picked up as much of the little bits and pieces left there, and which she would then cast in transparent resin, and then she would use these blocks, so to speak, to build new houses, which was quite a phenomenal exhibition of the time. And then, of course, you have these very delightful, I think they're light fittings.
They are light fittings and original artworks. The first one you saw, the Joburg bar, that is actually the logo of Joburg bar, which Brett Murray designed the logo. And this is, they are light fittings, and what they are, metal, that have then been cut out, and then a sheeting is placed, which then lights up behind that. So in the various colors, the red and pink in this case, and so on.
Yeah, very nice. And this is probably going back to Bitterkomix.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the figure, I think it's also because Conrad is also interested in tattoos. You know, he uses that quite often. You know, sometimes he would cover his whole body, his face, and what have you, in these tattoos. So it's also quite a nice addition. I'm just flipping through these wonderfully quirky works. I think this I could imagine on the bathroom doors.
I think they were. They were the identifier. I mean, it was a wonderful place. I mean, you know, the artists really doing all the decor and design. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and this brings us to the highlight of the whole session. This billboard. What on earth is going on here?
Well, you know, as I understand it, this lot consists of this billboard, a contemporary newspaper cut in Bruce Gordon's own copy of the book that was produced, which was an artwork in itself. I think this has gone down in legend and to some extent notoriety. It's really a very important work in the history of South African art. It's been reproduced in many books and catalogues. In some ways, it marks a moment of transition. You can see that December 29th, 2002 is the date. As I say, you know, the art world was really changing in that period of 2002, 2003. And what happened was there was a Michaelis auction, as there still is today, which included works by famous artists like Cecil Scottness and Easy Bailey and various other people donated artworks. But students could also donate an artwork to the auction at the time. Finest students, I think this was doing Younge's master's here. And he decided to nominate Bruce as an artwork in himself, the concept of Bruce, what would be an artwork. As is well known now, the artwork was purchased by the National Gallery at the auction. It was a performance, it was a concept piece. That's a much younger looking me in the background with Bruce Gordon. He stood up and was auctioned. He was then tattooed with the acquisition mark of the National Gallery. Of course, enormous scandal and outrage. What is this? What is this work? What is the National Gallery doing? You know, the whole performance was at the auction where Sue Williamson phoned in. She was in Argentina, as I recall at the time. She phoned in and she said she's prepared to go up to 200 Rand for Bruce. And then after that, she left the bidding, and it became this bidding war between Susie Bell, the well-known arts celebrity and fashion icon and so on, with Marilyn Martin seemingly getting it just under, I think it was 32,000 Rand or something, which was an astronomical amount for an artwork at that time. I seem to recall the Cecil Scott sold for 20,000 at that auction. Everyone was like, what on earth is happening? What has happened? Has the world gone mad? And of course, it was a kind of, obviously it was Ed Young's work, but it was a kind of, you know, Bruce and I were very involved in it. I was the auctioneer. I became the curator of the work at the National Gallery. It made newspaper headlines. People in the art world were horrified. They were phoning Michaelis to ask what on earth is going on. And Malcolm Payne, who was then director of the art school, you know, kept absolutely straight faced and said, well, we're very pleased that this has happened, etc. Of course, it was all a ruse to kind of generate interest, and that's exactly what it did. It generated enormous interest in South African art. And I mean, the artwork technically is owned by the National Gallery. It's when they, on the occasions that they have shown it in many of their retrospective exhibitions, they put up that poster. I don't know how many of them could possibly survive from that period, if any, other than the National Gallery's one, which Ed gave to the National Gallery to stand in for the person when he can't be there, so to speak. And this is Bruce's own copy of that, and along with a couple of other items which are you know, speak of that time. Yeah, it's the closest thing you can have to having the artwork, so to speak, that's owned by the National Gallery.
Fantastic. So Marilyn Martin also tells the story in her a book recently published at the end of last year. But I want to know from Bruce your recollections of this event. Is Bruce on mute?
Yes.
Try again.
There
Bruce
we go.
Gordon is
there
not.
we go. Bruce?
You know, Egg begged me to be his artwork. I wasn't interested at first. And then on the Friday morning, he phoned me and pleaded, saying that he wasn't going to get his degree unless I pitched. And as Andrew said, there was a bidding war between Susie Bell and Marilyn Martin. The budget of the National Gallery was less than 50,000, and Susie went to 52,000. The next day she had buyer's remorse, and is quoted as saying she didn't think I matched her bedroom curtains, and then donated me to the National Gallery. I've been languishing there for 20 odd years. I think at the time that they gave me a makeover and perhaps a little maintenance money on a monthly basis. In fact, I might even form an artwork trade union and see if I can agitate for what I need. Thank you.
No, absolutely delightful, I thought. And you still have the tattoo. You have to. You state property. You gallery property.
Yes, and I believe that it's illegal for the gallery to sell any of their acquisitions.
Oh, that is.
There was a there was a follow-up to the whole acquisition. And then Ed and I were invited to the Torino Triennale in Italy, where I enjoyed 3 weeks of experiencing the culture of the city.
And in fact, if I may say, Bruce, what was so wonderful when the Torino Triennale had that exhibition, they had a formal loan agreement between the National Gallery and the Torino Triennale. It was all signed, and it was officially a loan from the National Gallery, and went through all the process. I think, you know, Angela Zender, the conservator, was involved in, assessing that this was all done properly and conservationally soundly, etc. You know, it really does show a way that the art world is you know, can can really look at itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Certainly, I think a highlight of the whole online auction. Okay, I think we have covered all the lots in this wonderful session of the Joburg Bar. If there are any questions to Andrew, to Bruce, perhaps, I'm sure I will be able to facilitate, and I'm sure the two speakers will hang around.
Yeah, I'd like to, just on behalf of Strauss & Co, thank you, Andrew and Bruce, of course, for joining us. I mean, what an insightful little piece of history there. And it was really great to hear more about the works themselves. And we do encourage you all to go and have a look at session 2 of the online auction, because the works really are fantastic, but maybe you want to go and have a look at them a little bit in more detail. But thank you, Andrew and Bruce. It was really fantastic to have you. And I'd be happy to open the platform. If anyone really wants to ask questions, you can unmute yourself and maybe we can ask some questions. Otherwise, we're very, very grateful to have you all listen today. And hopefully you'll join us again tomorrow for the 4 p.m. talk.